Welcome to Gold Coast Insider, where we bring you business insights, stories, opportunities and forecasts from movers and shakers across the Gold Coast. I'm your host, Estella Rodiguero. I'm CEO of Regional Development Australia Gold Coast. I'd like to welcome and introduce Geoff Matthews. Geoff brings a wealth of international business and event experience to the Sustainable Industrial Manufacturing Event Series, as well as a deep understanding of the issues facing industry as we transition towards sustainable manufacturing. He is widely published on the subject of energy modulation and has authored a number of thought-provoking articles on the decarbonisation of industry. In 2020, Geoff co-authored the first Aluminium Production Pathway to Zero Carbon 2050. Geoff has also given keynote addresses at a large number of international conferences and is an advisory board member of the Future Aluminium Forum. Welcome, Geoff. It's great to be speaking to you today. So let's start at the beginning. How did you start your environmental conversation?
It's a long time ago now. It dates me. I was personal private secretary of the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and during the 10 years I was in his office, we dealt with some environmental concerns. One of them was felling of native forests in New Zealand, and one of the great forest conservationists, a man called Stephen King. And he was such a conservationist, he used to walk around in bare feet so he could touch the earth. So we're talking about one of the original greenies. But he was a great man. And he had set up a tree, a 100-foot tree, and stopped the bulldozing by the then Prime Minister Robert Muldoon of this forest. And he camped up.
That was living up the tree?
Yeah. And it's Stephen King. So you might have heard of him. So what happened, just for viewers, is that they camped up there, but they didn't tell anyone they were up they were 120 foot off the ground, and the TV cameras got to the men bulldozing it, cutting it down. They said, "Well, what about the people in the trees?" And they said, "There's nobody up there." And then as the TV cameras bent out, the Stephen's face sort of come out, and then they stopped cutting the trees because they didn't know which trees the people were in, and it was only him and his brother. It might have been a couple of others. But they stopped the entire felling of this native forest, and it shouldn't never have been felled. And now it's a national park, and the whole history is part of it. But Stephen, fast forward, we get the Jim Bolger gets in a bloodless in-party coup. He gets ousted. You know what those are in Australia. And the new Prime Minister was coming in, and we all had to go. And I'd spent 10 years there, and it was like my home, and I lived there. And suddenly I was thrown out on the street. But the phone rings, and it's Stephen King, and he says, "Geoff, it's your destiny to go and restore a forest." And it was like, oh, okay, and I didn't particularly know what that meant, but only a little bit later I went and formed. We raised money from the public to do pest control on state-owned land. First time it had ever been done. We had to get past bureaucratic hurdles and legislation and everything. And we restored this forest called Pukaha Mount Bruce. It's where we had our wildlife breeding, our native bird breeding in cages in the bottom of the forest. So we pest control, got all the pests off it, and then we let the birds loose into the forest, and they now breed there still today. And as part of that, I recorded a CD of native bird song about how a forest would have sounded. And that's still the largest selling CD of native bird song in New Zealand. And it's the largest fundraising. This is 25 years on. And I remember to launch the CD and the program, the Department of Conservation brought Stephen King and I remember standing in front of him, and he was so proud of me. And I just remember that moment that I'd restored this native forest. And then I went off and started commercializing businesses and making lots of money and doing those things you do for a while. And then I got the opportunity to commercialize a product that I think could change the world in a better way for aluminium smelting. It was to enable smelters to modulate up and down. Mm-hmm. And trying to commercialize that globally, and the reason I spoke so much and have written so much is that I decided to change the world. You need to start a conversation. And so I started a conversation about this, and nobody was ready for it. Just people's eyes would glaze over for it.
Because we were talking, about 20 years ago or something, were we?
Not so far, but in aluminium smelting, they didn't want to move, still don't.
Yeah.
So I ended up, at speaking at conferences, and then people would come up and ask me, what can I do at home? And there were questions like that. It's really amazing. And I started reading and being in those circles and full-time in industrial sustainability. You've got to be in it almost full-time to keep up with it. The changes, that the technology coming on stream, what's happening is every day. You couldn't read it all in a day. You even take one subject, hydrogen. You couldn't read everything published on hydrogen in a day around the world. So things are moving really rapidly. And that sort of and then during COVID, the aluminium and the Russian gas crisis, a lot of the aluminium smelters I've been talking to around the world, Slovenia, Slovakia, Montenegro, Romania, a lot of them, they all closed down. And energy modulation probably wouldn't have helped them, by the way. So that business sort of got stopped in its tracks, and then I was still a sought after speaker, and so I was meant to chair a session on demand side response at Sustainable Industrial Manufacturing in Brussels last year, and this is sort of how we got it down to Australia and the Gold Coast. So just before I was going. And a couple of things here, Stella. We've gone from climate deniers to climate doomers, and this is the people who don't think. And the worst thing is our children are part of the climate doomers. Some of them, and my son become a climate doomer, not in a disastrous way, but he said he wouldn't have kids. And I said, why? And he said, well, it would be unfair to bring them into the world when the world's just going to burn. And by the way, Australia was on fire at that time. So, you were burning and California was too. And I thought about that and just how terrible a thought that is, that there were kids, and he was 19, that decided he wasn't going to have kids. And what sort of world were we leaving them?
Yeah.
And then I was sitting on the couch.
Sorry for breaking in, which brings into mind that you mentioned you're inspired to develop it as part of hearing Greta Thunberg's famous speech. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So what happened? We were sitting, my son and I sitting on the couch watching the news, which we don't do often, but it just happened. And Greta Thunberg was on, and it was one of these famous comments she made at some ministerial meeting in Europe, some high-powered ministerial meeting. And she said, it's all blah, 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 no more blah, blah, blah. And my son turns and looks at me. And I say, it is, Tom. I said, it is. She's right. I said, I've been to these conferences. I've spoken at these conferences. And it's blah, blah, blah. And he just took one look at me and said, what are you going to do about it? And so that sort of reverberated a bit inside my head for a while. And I took both my children, 19 and 21. I took them to Brussels to watch me speak. They'd never seen me speak. They'd never seen what Dad does. And also this bit of this climate dooming that was coming into them. And I said, there's thousands of people doing stuff all around the world on the globe. You have no idea how fast technology is developing and what people are doing. So I took them to Brussels, and it was just after COVID, so it was sort of 2 years of lockdown, and we could get out of New Zealand, and we're sitting in the conference in Brussels, and the second speaker up, I think, was the head of climate change for the Commissioner for Climate Change for the EU, like one of the most powerful women in Europe, and she got up and she started speaking, and I wrote in my notebook blah 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 and showed it to my son. Because what she was doing, she was lecturing everyone there about why they should do it and giving numbers and stats and how terrible the CO2 projections are. And all of the people in the room were actually the people trying to do something. And they didn't need another lecture about why you should do it.
Yeah.
And so I talked to the conference owners who I had got to know over the previous, 5 or 8 years. And I'd spoken at a number of their conferences and written for their magazines. And I said, look, I'd like to bring SIM, Sustainable Industrial Manufacturing, to Asia Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
But if I did it, I'd like to put my own spin on. And they said, well, what's that? And I said, no more blah, blah, blah. I said, it's got to be where the rubber meets the road. It's got to tell people stories about what they're doing. It's got to connect people. It's got to connect those. And in fact, how I got to the Gold Coast was I was sitting there. So I remember sitting outside in Brussels in the sun. And I got a message from a mate on the Gold Coast here, Brendan Downey, who we're old triathlete buddies. And Brendan runs a lot of the triathlons in Queensland. So, a lot of people would have done his fun runs or triathlons or something. And he said, why don't you bring this to the Gold Coast? And I never thought about it. And I said, oh, why not? And so so that was that. So thank Brendan for that. And so I then started thinking about the Gold Coast and what I wanted people to be able to do is tell their story. Those who had really good tech to sell, tell their story. And those who couldn't start, because they didn't know where, to be able to connect with those people. And Brendan's the one who actually, I told him what I was trying to do. And Brendan said to me, so what you're trying to do, Geoff, is you're trying to connect the people who want to do something with the something. Yeah. And I said, exactly, Brendan. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do.
So we'll regroup around on SIM-PAC a little bit later, but I wanted to delve a little bit deeper. Like, you've got a wealth of knowledge and experience in sustainable industrial manufacturing. You also have a deep understanding of the issues that are facing industry as we transition towards that sustainable manufacturing. What do you see as the top issues facing manufacturing here in Australia? Big question.
Yeah. I think the big issue is Australia gets enormous amount of wealth from its mining minerals, and so that's, by the way, they're moving rapidly because you've got so many remote mines. It's actually, there are studies done, and I talked to I did my own podcast and talked to a company, Energy Flex in Brisbane. And they did the Oz Minerals Remote Mine Challenge, and came up with a conclusion that it was more economic to run it off renewable energy. But you have to change the way you think. So instead of buying one machine and running it 24/7, that's the old economic paradigm that was built under cheap fossil fuels and available power. It was proved to be better to run two machines really hard 12 hours a day. And that's the type of thinking you've got to do. You've got to look at how you deploy capital, and you may have to rethink your industrial processes, and you've got to look at storing energy inside the industrial process. So that process energy storage, it's called, and the guys from Energy Flex created that term. I credit them for that. So what it means is that, here's the simplest example: good old-fashioned stockpiling. A stockpiling is a form of energy storage. And so in Australia, where you might get really high, plentiful renewables in spring and autumn when there's lots of wind and sunshine, but not a lot of demand because it's a little bit cooler, you make you overproduce things, and then you can use it in a time, because the energy factor is going to change the old economic paradigms. And so I think the biggest challenge is for people, for Australian industry, to understand that there are real advantages in renewable energy. There's going to be a lot of time the energy's free or negative priced. It's going to be, if you're going to be, and you can build your own, by the way, so you could use power for nothing, but there are going to be times that it's going to be incredibly expensive. So you need to be able to modulate down or switch off or change your process around available energy and look at it as an opportunity. You don't need coal. You don't need to burn coal. You could run everything. You could run Australia and a lot of the world off your renewable energy here. In fact, that's what you've got. You've got the most plentiful renewable energy that in the globe, and you shouldn't be burning coal. But the pain is, and even on a personal level, the pain is we have to learn to use the power when it's plentiful and available. It's setting your washing machine timer, setting your swimming pool pump. those sorts of things are going to become, hopefully we'll have a smart home and it does it for all of us. But you can start by doing that, because energy pricing is going to be very, very expensive at certain times and incredibly cheap at others.
Yeah. Oh, good. But okay, so in your experience, is industry actually making those moves? Are they making a move? Do you see that happening?
Yes. But you could say not fast enough. Okay. And I can say that, but the IEA is globally we're not running fast enough. Like we've doubled the production of batteries in I think we doubled in the last 2 years, but the calculations are we need 44 times that. So by 2030, so we're just not running fast enough. We're not making the changes fast enough. And so there are great examples, and you could look at it. There's a whole basket of reasons why that we're not running fast enough. But those who are committed, they're running really fast and they're doing a great job. So I think it comes from if you've got a CEO or a board or a bunch of shareholders are really committed to sustainability, you'll run fast. You can do it. There was a time a few years ago you couldn't. There were hurdles in the way. Those hurdles, and especially with energy in Australia, are not there. The structural hurdles are not there. Yes, there's some transmission issues and connecting solar farms, but I would encourage people. I think one of the examples of and one of the manufacturers of LPG in Australia just built a 100 megawatt solar farm to power their LPG factory.
Talk to you about that, yeah.
And so that shows you that it's the most ridiculous thing if you think about it. But what makes you smile is they looked at the cheapest form of energy and it was solar. So, and I think people need to be building their own solar and using it, not trying to just put it into the grid, because that's handing the grid a problem. Because the grid's going to get, everyone hands the grid, I take my power, and when it can't, when there's no one to use it, and then so it's not the answer. And the other thing, there's a freedom of renewables in Australia that some countries don't have. You can't build your own renewables and use them. It's more than just a domestic level. So so people using their own battery storage, using their own manufacturing process to store energy in it. That's really the key driver for Australia in the interim, in the next few years.
So companies are facing a lot of challenges, right, as we move forward. And this sustainability and environmental issue is becoming really, you hear a lot more. It's becoming noisier. What do you see as the most urgent things they need to do? And then not only the most urgent, but what are the opportunities for industry moving forward?
Yeah, again, I don't want to sound like a stuck record, but the opportunities in Australia is, in fact, I watched a video the other day, and it was made in Germany, and it was a German documentary maker making about steel, decarbonising steel, which they got to use hydrogen. And at the end of the video, the CEO of the steel making company said, and we'll need lots of hydrogen, lots and lots of stuff. We have to import it from countries like Australia.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, okay, but you then go, well, why would you send iron ore and hydrogen all the way to Germany to make the steel here? Why wouldn't you make it in Australia?
Absolutely.
And so the statement and the thought that Australia could become the decarbonised industrial powerhouse of the world, I believe that's an opportunity, because and it is an opportunity in front of people. And so, there's a lot of opportunity. As I said, power essentially could be free if you use it right. And most of it's thinking better about how you use it. And some of that, I'll give you a good example. I did a study for a asphalt company, a big one. I won't name them, but they were big. And the asphalt company, they called me in. They said, we're getting charged peak power rates. And I said, well, what do you use your power for? And they said, we make the asphalt, we keep it warm overnight, and then we deploy it the next day. And I said, well, how do they heat it by electricity, starting at 6 p.m. at night and leaving at 6 in the morning? And I said, well, that is peak rates. Why do you have it? Who set that timer? And they said, oh, the Sparky, the electrician who installed it. And I said, well, why? And they said, oh, we leave work at 6 p.m. and we come back at 6 a.m. And I said, well, how long, if you turn the power off, how many degrees heat would it lose? I'm just going to move it slightly, get out of the sun. I'm sorry that the sun here in Australia is coming.
Okay. No problem.
And they said, how many degrees does it lose? And they said, oh, a degree an hour. And I said, well, could you heat it 12 degrees hotter before you turn? Oh, yeah. So they could have actually heated it up during the day and left it all night.
Yeah.
And so
it's thinking outside the square, though, too, isn't it?
Well, it's looking at it. Sometimes that's really common sense. What actually happened is I put them in a bill for it, and we actually got a government grant for them, a regional development grant or something, to look at the study. And I said, if you take this grant, they will that knowledge becomes public.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you really got to think about that. They paid the whole bill and didn't take the grant because they knew that. And look, this is a big company, and that was a small asphalt plant. We're talking a savings of $500,000 a year in power.
Oh my God!
And just for a small one. And if you ran it across Australia and New Zealand, every asphalt plant could be used as a virtual battery.
Right.
You get what I mean? So some of it's just really, really simple rethinking the process.
Yeah. So I wanted to come back around to SIM-PAC, and I wanted you to talk a little bit around SIM-PAC because you've just had some exciting news that Tourism Queensland are backing SIM-PAC to come to the Gold Coast in 2025 and 2027. So can you talk us through what SIM-PAC will deliver and what is the model? Like why would we go to it?
Well, firstly, SIM-PAC, I wanted it to be an exhibition, a showcase, and a conference.
Right.
And the exhibition is so people can show their kit, what they're doing, these incredible things that can help industry. And a showcase, and the showcase is telling the story, because I'll tell you a really good example. When I was in Brussels, there was a small exhibition with a conference, and I went and I talked to this man, and he was dressed in a suit. He looked like middle-aged German sales executive, and he actually was. And he had this machine on display. And I said, what does the machine do? And it looked like a big round pipe and things. He said, that can heat any liquid to 1,500 degrees centigrade. And I knew what that meant. And I said to him, but that doesn't exist. That's impossible. That's one of the things. That's one of the problems. We can't get high temp heat from solar panel. And he said, well, it does. We built it. And I was looking at it going, this could change the world for a lot of people. This is the problem is that we can't get high temp heat out of electricity. So they said, oh, well, we built it. My company built it. And he didn't seem particularly excited about it. And I was more excited than him. And the penny sort of dropped on me, and I went, and I asked him the question, how many employees do you have? And he said 143,000 worldwide. So they were a big company. Now, I went on their website to try and find this piece of kit, and it took me 20 minutes, and I found it as a part number down the bottom of something. There wasn't even a story about it. So I know that is game changing for the electrification, because that's one of the things we've got to do to get to decarbonisation. We have to electrify everything, and high temp heat's one of the areas that we can't electrify, and is a problem. People have to burn stuff to make it, and they burn coal or diesel or oil or gas, and we're looking to substitute that with burning hydrogen, possibly methanol, but having that be able to get it off a solar panel and heat any liquid, he said, any liquid to 1,500 degrees. That's really, really interesting stuff. And so I wanted people to show their stuff, but also to be able to tell a story. And if they couldn't tell it, well enough, I'd like to do it for them. Because that's how we go. That's how we go. We're only going to get to decarbonisation through collaboration, through innovation, or innovation through collaboration. We've got to collaborate. We've got to. No person's going to go it alone. We've got to bolt all these things together. And so that's what I wanted in the conference. And I wanted people who didn't know where to start to come and get an idea of where to start. Those who are on the rate and have got new tech, and also I've divided the halls, the exhibition halls, into four halls. And the first one is that I've done them in TRL levels, technology readiness levels. So the first hall is the future hall. That's the stuff that's just being, created at the moment. And that's to look at the stuff we need to fast track. We need to fast track that and get it to market. The second hall is the stuff in early stage trials. And that's tomorrow's hall. That's the stuff we've even got a plan for. We've got a plan to bring it into the system. And so that's tomorrow's hall. And then today's hall is the stuff that you can bolt on today, you can deploy today.
Yeah.
And then there's a fourth hall, the knowledge hall, which is people who are selling their knowledge. It's engineers, process design, everyone from finance, financing projects and everything. That's all people who have knowledge. And that's how I've divided it up. So we've got a sort of a sensible approach to walking around it and having a look what we can do. And my aim is to try and make this the biggest conference in the world, or biggest expo in the world, of low emission technology for industry. And the Gold Coast, you've got, and in terms of manufacturing, if you looked at the big numbers for Australia, you've got 100,000 manufacturing companies employing 900,000 people. So that's an average of 9. So a lot of them will be small to medium-sized enterprises. And so I wanted the ability for those people to come and show their wares, tell their story, and also to be able to purchase solutions or understand better solutions, and go home going, I think I know how to do that now. I think I could go and reset my timers for my asphalt plant. Doing some of the basic stuff.
So because there's a perception in there that I'm out there in industry that whatever changes they have to make have to be these massive changes, which is actually initially going to be an investment, heavy investment, but it not necessarily has to be. It's just about fine-tuning down their processes and their systems, and that can actually lead to savings.
So I gave the guys at Energy Flex a line that they use when they're talking to manufacturers and to miners and everything else, because it comes from some of the power companies. I don't know if they have it in Australia, but my daughter was a student and she had an hour of free power. So, and it was 9 till 10 at night. And so they used to do all their washing, have their hot showers and, put the dryers on and do all that, the hour of free power. And I said, well, what about if you go to somebody and say, what would you do with 3 hours of free power? And that's the first question you've got to answer yourself. What would you do with 3 hours of free power? And then you think about it and say, well, if you had your own solar, you could probably get 5 to 8 hours, depending on the time of the year and where you are, free power. And so some of those investments are they're intellectual and emotional investment to say we're going to change our process. We've done this. I talked to a company the other day on my podcast, and a 60-year-old firm. The son took the dad's firm over, and they wash commercial windows and build it. And they've built what they think is, and I haven't researched it, so I can't tell you if it's not. But they've built the first high-pressure washer that runs off lithium-ion batteries. And so they put the batteries down on the ground in the truck. They charge it off renewable energy, and they can wash the windows. They've also done some really clever stuff with using 85% less water, and they've got zero runoff to the street drain. Nothing goes into the drains. And And this is a 60-year-old family company, and the son said, he just stood there and said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way than hanging off people off buildings, tall buildings. And also, here's the thing: my research has had a look at if we mechanized or put robots or machines to replace the men hanging off buildings for all these high rises.
Mm-hmm.
There's been 220 billion square meters of glass produced in the last 53 years, by the way. It's enough to go around the world 5.5 times.
Something I never thought about, yes.
No. But this is the thing. This is that tiny little, you put a global context. If we mechanized all the high-rise buildings today, my research has worked out it would be like adding 21 million cars to the road, because they would all have to run off petrol generators.
Mm.
So we can't automate in one place and create robots and automation unless we've decarbonised the system.
Yeah.
And so there's a home business, 60-year-old home business, just suddenly done something cutting edge.
Wow.
Actually, we don't think anyone else has done it, or he doesn't think anyone else has done it. And so high pressure washers, that's the sort of stuff that we see from the grassroots, and this is an appeal to the grassroots of the Gold Coast as well. Is that if there's people with these ideas, don't hold back with them. Come to SIM-PAC, show them off. That's the type of thing that we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, it's exciting because it will be here in 2025, which is amazing, and 2027. I think it's in Brisbane next year.
Yes, we're gonna hold the first one in February in Brisbane 2024.
Right.
I sort of call it SIM-PAC Light. It's to get one away, and then keep rolling on to the first big one in 2025, and then every other alternate year it's going to be held somewhere else in Asia. So. Okay. And I'm doing that deliberately so we can. Asia is Australia's largest trading partner, and we need to have those interconnections. And because Australia will get asked to manufacture more. I mean, with its renewable energy, abundant sunshine coming out, they will get asked to manufacture more, and also to sell your goods overseas, particularly the EU. If you can't trace your carbon footprint or your embedded carbon, whatever system they want, it's two different things. You're not going to sell your goods in the EU. Forget it. Wow. It's not going to happen. So you've got to understand your own carbon accountability in your own supply chain, and you've got to be able to. Some people will choose better supply chains, and some people, will just make changes in their own business. And also, what's going to happen is it's going to become end of life is going to become very important. Mm-hmm. So, what happens to your product when it's finished with, and so the recyclability of it is, you can, if you're looking into the future. You won't be able to manufacture anything. You won't be allowed to manufacture anything unless it's completely can be 100% recycled. Just not going to happen. That's the only way we're going to stop this. And we shouldn't be afraid of it. And because it has opportunity. For example, let's just say aluminium can be recycled indefinitely, and uses only 5% of the original energy it had to make it. So indefinitely, that's thousands of years, as many times as you like. But we've got to get better at recycling aluminium. And this is also community stuff.
Yeah.
So there are countries which are, Norway's way ahead. They recycle 95% of aluminium. By the way, there's around about 75% of all the aluminium ever made in history is still in circulation. So, but our rates, New Zealand is 63%. I think Australia is something like 67. I could be wrong, but it's not. But it needs to be 95% at least, even higher. So, So those sorts of things. So, unless you have a pathway for your goods for everything to be recycled, that you simply won't be able to manufacture and sell them in the future.
But Geoff, there's got to be an education piece there too, because we're told, oh, here's the recycle bin, here's the other bin, and so people don't understand the journey that aluminium would take. And so if they understood that, and if that was clearly shown to them, I think that would preempt them doing it, because we don't take them on the journey. We just have recycle bins, and then everyone goes, well, it probably ends up in landfill. There's a whole debate around that.
And it probably does, because a lot of it will be contaminated with food and stuff, and it can't be used. It's coming. I went to Japan maybe 5 years ago. I've been to Japan a lot, but about 5 years ago I was there, and there were recycling bins, but there were lots of them, and I couldn't understand the Japanese on them. So I just sort of trying to work out and throwing bits and pieces. And the owner of the Airbnb that I was at was going through the recycle bins and going through my rubbish. Mm-hmm. And he finally said to me, just leave your rubbish here and I will sort it. And I said, why? And they get fined for putting the wrong thing in the wrong bin. Oh. Okay. Now, that is also starting to happen in the Western world. And I think it's actually one of the things that happens in Norway too. It's one of the Scandinavian countries. I read it. It's either Norway or Sweden. Mm-hmm. So in the future, you'll get it. The traffic wardens will have a new job. They'll stick your bin, and you will get punished. Mm-hmm. And it's also meaning and so what will then happen? And look, I'm a fan for it, by the way, not because I like paying fines, because it's the fastest way to change human behaviour. So then you'll go, and look, I wanted to praise an Australian company here, and it's a Mexican taco company. And do you know the one? It's the chains all around it.
No, sorry.
Okay, it's a big chain, and I went and bought some takeaways, and I particularly get upset buying takeaways because everything in there, most of it's non-recyclable, and it comes in a plastic bag, and the type of plastic non-recyclable, and it's terrible spoons, and then you eat a takeaway meal, the most temporary thing you can do, it's gone in 15 minutes, and that waste that you've just collected, a lot of that will stay in the environment for 500 years. So you're just eating something that's 15 minutes, and the containers that came in will be in the environment 500 years, and that to me is just like, if you think about it, you go, oh, it hurts your head. So this as an Australian company, everything was recyclable. So it came in a paper bag. The container it came in, it was made out of sugarcane fibre. And I thought, oh, they've messed up here. They got a plastic spoon. I looked at it, and they said they had compostable on it. Oh, so wow. And then it was wrapped in aluminium, and so everything in there was recyclable.
So is that gas husband or something? Is it?
Yes.
That's it.
Gomez and
yeah, that's it. That's the one.
And so it was the first takeaway meal that I could have and feel completely fine, rather than except the old-fashioned fish and chips in the newspapers was actually really quite good.
I don't think they come in.
No, we're old enough to remember. So,
yeah, we are. Sorry.
But then it comes to the consumer will start to realise if they're taking it home, and it can't go in the recycling, and it's not compostable, and it can't go in the tip phase, and if they're getting fined for it, they simply won't buy it, that takeaway. And that means the takeaway joint's got to go and get, and obviously if one company can do it, the rest can do it. And then suddenly the people making the sugarcane fibre containers, they'll just make more of them. Yeah. And then somebody will work out, oh, we can make these from hemp. And hemp, by the way, absorbs 4 times more carbon than any other plant on Earth.
Oh, wow.
And so expect to see a lot of hemp grown in the future. And so those are the sorts of things that, you have a stick at one end and you'll change behaviour through the chain. Yeah. And also some of it's regulation. I'm not a great regulation person. I'd like us all to make our own great choices in life, but plastic straws. I mean, there was something, I don't know how fast it was in New Zealand, but we just regulated. Poof. And 1 week later, there was no plastic straws, and nobody cared. Nobody missed them.
Yeah. What about plastic bags, though? I mean, there's been
we outlawed that in New Zealand a year ago, and you just got to. I think sometimes it's it's your political system. I can remember the GST debate.
Yes.
Back in New Zealand, when we brought GST in, the Prime Minister was David Lange at the time. He got up and said, "We're bringing in GST in 6 weeks' time." 6 weeks. And the retailers and everyone dealing with GST, 6 weeks. Nobody had time to get a protest movement going. They were so they were so shell shocked. They brought it in 6 weeks. And I can remember 6 years later, I'd come to Australia and they would look at me and go, "You got the GST, like we've got the plague or something, It's like, just get on with it." And so things like regulating against plastic bags, just get on with it.
Just do it. We have to, haven't we? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I my first night here on the Gold Coast last night, I went to Coles and I got the $2 fibre bags that I'll use, and you get used to it and you throw them in the boot of your car, and you change your behaviour. The first couple of times you'll get to the supermarket, I've got no bags, and then after a while you learn, you throw them in the boot of your car.
You learn, or you carry them all out in your arms because you've got about 10 bags that you bought and didn't bring them in.
Yeah.
Which is what I do. Look, it's been really interesting. I could actually keep talking with you, but we'll have to round it off. You're a new Gold Coaster, friend.
Yeah.
Gold Coaster. Why the Gold Coast? What do you see about the Gold Coast that you think is amazing? Why should every person want to live here?
Oh no, I'm going to be one of those. I'm going to be one of those recent immigrants that don't want anyone else to come.
I know. We try not to tell anybody, but yeah.
Yeah. I know you're not from these parts either. You migrated south, didn't you?
No, I'm a born and bred Queenslander. Thank you.
Oh yeah, but you were further up the coast, though, weren't you?
Yeah, a little bit up the coast. Yeah, but I've seen the light. I've been here for about 6 years now, so I saw the light. I came.
Yeah. A couple of things that I don't like. I lived in the cold. I lived in Queenstown for a number of years, and my skiing days are over. And I like the warm. I like the outdoor lifestyle here. I've got a couple of mates from my triathlon days who are still here, so looking forward to going out for a bike ride with them. And I just bought a paddleboard today, so.
You really are adopting our lifestyle, aren't you? Look at
I'll head off for a swim later today too. So yeah, the lifestyle, and actually it was the first time 22 years I've been a father and had 2 kids at home, and then as of yesterday I'm an empty nester. So
paddleboard.
Yeah. So that's why, and there was the opportunity, to commit to bring the SIM-PAC here, and I'm really looking forward to that, and also just general lifestyle and pleasant place. I like what the city's done with electrifying its trams and public transport. I think that's great. I stayed here for a week last month and never used an Uber, never used a car, got up to Brisbane and back. That's the other thing that we've got to lose our love affair with cars if we're living in dense urban areas. I have bought that motorway up to Brisbane, and it's much easier taking a train. Yes. So there was some great things that I liked about the place. So I'm very happy to be here. Yeah.
Well, I'll probably see you out in the water on your paddleboard, and have a good day. And thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been incredibly interesting.
Thank you.
I'm sure to catch up with you closer to your conference as well. So we'll regroup before that happens. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks for listening today. For a complete list of podcast episodes and transcripts, go to rdagoldcoast.org.au/podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter.